Hey everybody, great to see you this morning. It's a beautiful day here in northern Illinois, and as you can see, the snow has melted and all of my crocuses have survived, and my daffodils will be coming up soon, and I'm super excited about all of that. So this whole week we're working on, hey Annette, this whole week we're working on tools and tips and tricks that help us kind of survive the modern day world. Hey Bill, good to see you. So, my specialty is body-mind science, let's say, how the body and the mind work together and the nervous system works with all of this. Hey, Beverly. And there are things that we haven't really learned in this modern age. They're information and ideas that have been around for thousands of years, but people haven't been passing it on. It used to get passed on in cultures and traditions, and as we've all broken up, especially in this country, this information, this really great body-mind science isn't being passed on. And so because of that, I grew up somebody who was pretty anxious and had some trauma in my life and some difficulties. And I really had to learn with my boots on the ground how to, hey Denise, how to survive and manage high levels of stress and anxiety. And it was such a passion of mine that I became a shiatsu massage therapist and a body-mind expert. And I totally specialize in the body-mind pieces of Asian medicine. So today we're going to be talking about how to reverse the symptoms, my tips, the things that I've always used to reverse the symptoms of overwhelm. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite therapies. And what do I put in a detox bath? Beverly, typically I'll use Epsom salts, and I'll use something gentle like lavender or chamomile. Those work pretty well. If you try to do something heavy duty like tea tree or something along those lines, you end up having an adverse reaction. So when I do something like a bath, to detox anything, I'll keep it very gentle. Epsom salts work great because they pull water out of your body. And then they also give you amounts of magnesium, which help with depression and help with other things along those lines. So I keep it basic when I look at baths. Epsom salts with any favorite gentle essential oil that you love is perfect. Okay, so, and that's a great way to reverse overwhelm, actually. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite therapies, and it's called Feldenkrais. Moshe Feldenkrais was married to a pediatrician. Hey, Natividad, and and this was like, 100 years ago or so, and he would watch her work with the babies, and he'd watch how they would move and how they'd grow and evolve, and he developed his own mind-body therapy that, he coined after himself called Feldenkrais. One of the basic principles of Feldenkrais is there is no right way or no wrong way to do anything. The whole key is to use as much of your body, as many of your resources as you have available to you. And babies do that. They're always looking for how they can be the most efficient and the most resourceful, intuitively with how they're going to do things. They don't think it through. They don't get rid of steps. They don't do any of that. They say, how can I use, because they're not thinking about it. There's this nervous system thing that says, how can I use everything that I have to reach for this toy, or to stand up? And there's no judgmentalisms against it. So Feldenkrais, the idea is you aren't doing something wrong. There is no right way to do something and no wrong way to do something. Instead, we want to look at doing the widest variety of things possible in order to keep our body healthy. So when we're in overwhelm, and I know exactly what overwhelm is. Hi Nardia, I deal with overwhelm. I used to deal with overwhelm on a very regular basis, and now I've gotten to the point in my life and my practice where I'm pretty balanced. I mean, it still catches me off guard, and it did a few weeks ago, and the exhaustion and the heaviness, and it almost feels like there's concrete on you. Hey Kathy, like you can hardly move. And for some people, their mind speeds up and their mind doesn't stop. And other people like me, their mind starts to shut down and you just become this lump of clay that when I'm in overwhelm, that can't do anything but stare out the window and hope for all of it to pass. Now, a lot of people are living in overwhelm on a regular basis, on a daily, moment by moment basis. Hey, Ruth. And they're starting to develop these symptoms and side effects of constant chronic overwhelm. And it starts to come out in bad hips or bad knees. It starts to come out in not being able to sleep. It comes out with physical or health issues with their heart or with their organs. And we just keep taking more things in order to compensate, you know, and then all the articles out there say, well, if you just do, you know, ... then your problem will be solved. But what the piece they're really missing is this Moshe Feldenkrais piece that says there is no right way to do something and there is no wrong way to do something. Instead, you want to do a wide variety of things in order to have a balance and a counterbalance. And Asian medicine is exactly like that. Asian medicine isn't about a right or a wrong. It's about how do I uniquely stay in my balance? How do I find a balance that I'm comfortable with, that I can live with? Because, you know, as far as you swing to the right with something is as far you're also going to swing to the left. So there's, you know, there can be a wide swing. My goal for my life has been to bring things closer to center so that I don't have such a wide swing in myself. But that wide swing is still a balance. We're always balancing ourselves off and out in some way. But if you don't like the balance that you're in, if let's say you don't like the level of drama that you have in your life or the level of exhaustion or overwhelm, then you want to start bringing things closer to center. Hey, Kristen. So the way you do that is you take back your power. You start realizing that the drama in your life or the feelings in your life is a balance that you're in, and you are ready to change the balance. And the way you change the balance is by doing the opposite of what you do on a regular basis. So I'll give a great example. When people come to me, usually they have, you know, their right side is worse than their left side or vice versa. You know, their right shoulder worse than their left or you know, there is no perfect sort of thing. And it's the right side has been compensating for the left side and the patterns and the habits that we have in moving and walking and living life. And so one of the first tips that I give people is if you tend to walk with, you know, lead with your right foot, with your right leg being dominant. When you remember, I want you to start to lead with your left foot or your left leg. Maybe when you're walking down the hall or in the grocery store. If you tend to lean on your right leg more than your left leg, pay attention to that. And if you're in the grocery store, standing in line somewhere, or standing in the shower, you know, lean on your left leg for a while. That's a great body posture thing that you can do just by walking. And when you break that pattern, when you do that something different, you start to relieve the symptoms of your habits of overwhelm. And it starts to also rewire your brain. Whenever you do something different and your brain thinks differently, you start to look at the world differently too. So one of my easiest tips is if you know, to start changing your mind and start changing how you feel is if you typically walk and lead with your right leg, when you think about it, lead with your left or vice versa. The same thing is true about if you tend to sit at a computer or a desk for a long period of time. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the posture of everything leaning forward and your shoulders coming forward and your head coming forward. The problem is when you don't balance it out. And so at the end of the day, do some reverse passive supportive stretches. So put some pillows behind your back and do the, you know, where you lay over the pillows and you do the opposite of what you've been doing all day. So in body mechanics and body posture, notice what you're doing on a regular basis and do the opposite of it. Now, one of my other great tips for dealing with overwhelm is if we tend to rely, let's say, on coffee or on some sort of stimulant in order to wake us up. It's typically because we are dehydrated in some way. And so my tip is you don't have to get rid of the coffee. Remember, Moshe Feldenkrais says there's nothing wrong with taking the coffee, with drinking it, or even drinking a lot of it. The key is you need to balance out what what you're missing or what it's taking from you. So if you love to drink coffee in order to stay stimulated and wake up, my suggestion usually is drink a glass of water first thing in the morning, or bare minimum before you drink your coffee, and that will start to give you the hydration that you're really looking for, because that whole body exhaustion has a lot to do with not having enough fluid in your body, especially in the morning, not having enough water. And so if you drink your water before you drink your coffee, that will totally help balance it out. So, okay, another symptom of overwhelm is we tend to be moodier. We tend to be flying off the handle and having some emotional reaction. So if you're noticing that you are triggering quicker and you're having more emotional reactions with things, water comes in really handy with this too. Our pattern tends to be we trigger, we feel it, and then we're stuck in overwhelm. How am I going to feel better? What am I going to do? My suggestion is, as soon as you feel an emotion that you don't like, you can break the pattern of it. You can break the felt sense of it. And the way you do that, for me, is I'll drink water. Because drinking water gives your body a different felt sense. It gives your body a different focus. And the emotion that you're feeling, it dials down that anger or frustration or irritation. So if your habit or pattern is to see something and feel inside of yourself like you are flying off the handle, or you're feeling overwhelmed or exhausted, do break the pattern. Do as Moshi says, do something opposite of it, which for me is typically drinking water. But it will also be, if I'm inside, I will go outside. If I'm outside, I'll come inside. If I'm hot, I'll do something that makes me feel cold. If I'm cold, I'll do something that makes me feel hot. I will do something that gives me the opposite balancing felt sense of what I'm feeling right now. Because it's not about doing the right thing or the wrong thing. It's about finding the balance in what you're doing. I hope you're starting to catch on with this. So, overwhelm, the symptoms tend to be exhaustion. They tend to be moodiness. They tend to feel, to be this heaviness, and they tend to be pain. And so since it's the moodiness, the pain, and the exhaustion, do the things which are opposite in order to balance yourself out. So there is no magic pill, but what there is noticing what you're doing on a regular basis, and then as often as you can, as often as you remember, to do the opposite. If your tendency is to express yourself loudly and often, then the balance for that is sometimes don't express yourself. Don't put it all out there for everything. If your habit or tendency in overwhelm is to suppress everything, then you want to find on a regular basis a way to express what's going on. So look at uniquely you, look at your symptoms of overwhelm, and do the opposite to balance them out. Don't try to get rid of anything, because do you know how hard it is? Especially when you're exhausted and don't have any willpower left. So it's not about cutting anything out. It's about putting something in place to find the balance. So, okay, that's my tip for today. Listen to Moshe Feldenkrais, and your homework for today is to look for one pattern that you do and think of the opposite. And whether it's how you're walking, whether it's how you're holding your body, even if it's getting out of bed. If typically you get out of bed one way on the left side, try getting out of bed on the right side. Try getting out of bed in a totally different way. Because when we do things differently than our pattern, our mind rewires itself, our body rewires itself, and we start to use all of our resources. We start to use everything that we have, instead of just relying on, let's say, one tiny little muscle in our neck to do all the work. Instead, we're letting our whole body do the work, and we're keeping it from getting overwhelmed by doing the opposite. So look for your pattern. Find one thing, no matter how small it is, that's opposite of what you're used to doing, that will balance it out, and you will overall start to balance out your overwhelm and the symptoms of overwhelm. I don't know what the detox bath book is, so I'm not familiar with that. But there's always great information out there on, what herbs? Lavender and chamomile are my favorites, seriously, for detox. Just because when you start talking about baths and you start talking about skin, you have to be really, really mindful about what you're putting in there. And so you want to be wise about that and keep it as gentle as possible. And chamomile, unless you've got allergies to, unless you've got hay fever tendencies and you're allergic to ragweed, chamomile is usually pretty safe. And lavender is safe for just about everybody and everything. Hey, Carrie, great to see you. So don't forget your homework assignment today and start reversing your habits. And if you reverse those habits, then your overwhelm will start to dial down too. Okay? So I would love it if you would leave a comment below, if you would share this, if you would give your ideas and insights and understandings and your wisdom, because we're all in this together. And we all have this collective consciousness and this collective wisdom that we're here to share. And the only rule of thumb is be kind. You know, realize that we're all equals. No one's better than anybody else. And that everyone's journey is very unique. And so what works for you might not work for them, but suggestions are always welcome. So share some love, share the video. I'm so glad you're all here, and I'm glad to be a part of your life. Thanks. And I will see you tomorrow morning, okay? Bye.